QAnon-minded individuals have decided to file a lawsuit against Google-owned YouTube for the censorship of their conspiracy theory channels. Now, the individuals involved claimed that not only was their First Amendment right violated, but they had several other rights violated as well. Now, their legal argument, which I have gone over, comes down to essentially two claims against the social media giant. According to the lawsuit, requests an emergency injunction to address YouTube's October 15, 2020 purge of accounts in which YouTube abruptly deleted conservative content from its platform and terminated the accounts and channels that had hosted their content. YouTube's massive deplatforming worked to the severe detriment of both conservative content creators and American voters who seek out their content. In this action, plaintiffs seek immediate and emergency relief from the defendants' breaches of their contract with the plaintiffs, which have worked to completely deny plaintiffs the benefits of their contracts and services for which they bargained, to obliterate plaintiffs' livelihoods, and to deprive both the plaintiffs and their subscribers of their First Amendment rights. Plaintiffs seek immediate and emergency relief by way of temporary restraining order and/or injunction to avoid irreparable harm that cannot be cured or later resolved through monetary damages alone. Once the issue of emergency relief has been resolved, plaintiffs intend to amend this complaint to add claims for money damages, along with causes of action for, inter alia, international interference with prospective economic advantage. Essentially, their argument is, aside from seeking damages, that they were wrongfully censored, and that their basis for this wrongful censoring has some complexities to it. Now, YouTube's terms of service says that YouTube must provide notice of termination and suspension, allowing for time to back up any content. Now, this is what's written in their terms of service that you agree to when you create a channel or continue to have afterwards, etc. The terms of service change. So it's a right that you do have. One that is, I've never actually seen this extended to anyone. Press TV certainly never had any opportunity to back up their content. They were just suddenly locked out, as well as many other people as well. So it seems that this violation of the terms of service may actually, in fact, be true. Now, essentially, their argument is that YouTube changed policy with regards to harassment and hate speech. They claim YouTube said, further expanding both of our hate and harassment policies to prohibit content that targets an individual or group with conspiracy theories that have been used to justify real-world violence. But, as the plaintiffs claim, there was no amendment to the YouTube terms of service, so therefore shutting them down on this basis is wrong. The problem with this argument is that while it is not in the terms of service, it doesn't have to be. Now, I went and looked over the YouTube terms of service myself, and it says that you agree to follow YouTube policies, and then links to those policies. Those policies can be updated or changed at any time. So by signing the terms of service, you are agreeing to follow those policies. So while they say no, nothing was changed in the terms of service, nothing has to be changed. The policies themselves as separate documents can be changed, which by signing the terms of service, you agree to follow. So in this regard, they're claiming that YouTube changed the terms of service after they had been banned to include this means that YouTube wasn't being honest to begin with is completely false. This wasn't arbitrarily changed on their just to get them. Essentially, they're claiming it's not in the terms of service, but it doesn't have to be because it's listed in the policies which you agree to follow by signing the terms of service. So in this regard, they essentially don't have an argument in any way, shape, or form. YouTube is perfectly well within their rights to do this. In this particular argument, YouTube has done nothing wrong. Now, the other argument that's being made here is that They claim a violation of freedom of speech. Their First Amendment right has been violated by YouTube. Now, they do very specifically claim that plaintiffs are aware in the past, plaintiffs who have alleged First Amendment violations against defendants and other members of large social media companies, collectively Big Tech, have lost because Big Tech is comprised of companies, i.e., they have been considered private, not state actors whose actions are not constrained by First Amendment concerns. Yes, that is true. Technically, YouTube as a private entity is not restrained by the Constitution in this sense. Like, they're not the government. They're a private entity and thus are not legally obligated to give you your First Amendment right. So in this, they're acknowledging that. But this is where it gets complicated. They allege that because legislation has been written to curtail freedom of speech by the government, which affects YouTube, that they have lost their freedom of speech not because of the actions of YouTube as a private entity, but because of actions by the US government which compelled YouTube to do so. So they're saying that while YouTube is not censoring them, a state actor is using their influence to censor them, which would make it a violation of the First Amendment. Now, the problem with this is, at least in my, layman's understanding of this, this seems to be something the US government has done. Technically, YouTube cannot do anything that violates the law. So if the United States government writes a law that says YouTube has to act in a certain way, legally, YouTube is obligated to do so. If this is a restriction of freedom of speech, which is yet to be determined, then it would be the US government who actually did it, and not YouTube itself. That completely changes the argument that's made. So it's not YouTube's fault. YouTube is only following the law, which it has a legal obligation to do and would be punished if it doesn't. So this restriction of freedom of speech, if it is that, and that's still to be determined by the Supreme Court, etc., this violation is actually coming from the US government and is not the fault, legally, of YouTube. So, in my amateur's opinion and understanding of the law, and someone who has been a pro se litigant before, the people who are suing YouTube really don't have much of a legal argument at all. Now, having said that, I feel that their case is probably going to be thrown out, or YouTube is going to be able to successfully defend itself in court. And it's not really a matter of them having more money or anything like that. I think the law really is on their side in this case. The other question is the moral argument. Is it morally right for YouTube to do this? Is it morally right for the United States government to do it? Now, that's the thing about lawsuits. They're not really based on any kind of subjective morality. They're based on interpretations of codified law. So arguing whether or not conspiracy theory channels should be censored is a whole separate issue altogether. I am personally of the opinion that certain speech really is harmful to a society. If you had people running around claiming that putting a bullet in your own head was to transcend you to a path of enlightenment is something that should be censored, if it was a big enough of a problem that people were going around doing that. Because that is wrong. Sexualized imagery of underage individuals should be censored, and I think there's very few people who would openly say that that should be defended. So I think we're pretty much all in agreement that that should be censored. Everybody believes in censorship to some degree or another. anyone who is an absolutist in terms of free speech is a very questionable moral character. So we all believe in free speech. We all believe in censorship to some degree or another. Let's face it, we're Marxists. We believe in censoring and abolishing the ideas of the capitalist class. And the capitalist class believes in abolishing and censoring our ideas, which are a threat to their profits. I mean, this is the way it is. I mean, to pretend this isn't, or that there's some kind of objective morality in dealing with this censorship, is nonsense. Nazis will do whatever they can to stop communists, and communists will do whatever they can to stop Nazis. To pretend that's not a thing is simply nonsensical. So you see where I'm trying to go here with this moral argument. I think, in terms of the legal argument that's being made, that there really isn't much for these people who are suing YouTube to stand on. I think that there's a larger issue that needs to be resolved in the Supreme Court with regards to free speech in general, not specifically with YouTube. Should conspiracy theories be censored? And then another more important question, how do you define what a conspiracy theory is? And not only that, how do you objectively prove that something is a conspiracy theory or not? That is a whole another problem altogether, and that's part of what makes freedom of speech very difficult to grapple with. So you can understand the severe complexity that there is in this situation. And these are things that have yet to be decided in a court of law. So, I mean, I'm not just mindlessly taking the side of big capital in this case, in terms of YouTube. From my understanding of the law, these people don't really have much of a legal argument to go by. And that's what makes this all so difficult. If there really was someone that these people wanted to sue for their lack of freedom of speech, it should be a constitutional complaint made against the U.S. government for various laws that have been passed which compel YouTube to censor certain individuals.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.